Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Hello. I can't hear you, Patricia, but I just want to welcome all of our attendees to the meeting. Just give us just a few seconds. We will be elevating you up. This is the Manhattan Community Board 2 joint meeting between the Reopening Working Group and the Arts and Institutions Committee for the Restarting Together Museums panel tonight. So if you'll just bear with us for just a few minutes. Again, this is the Manhattan Community Board 2 joint meeting between the Reopening Working Group and the Arts and Institutions Committee for the Restarting Together series, focusing on museums tonight. Thanks.
Valerie, someone wants to be elevated.
Yeah, we're getting to them very shortly.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerie.
Great. Thanks everyone for your patience. We had a little bit of little technical issue, but we're on now. As I said before, this is Manhattan Community Board 2. This is a joint meeting between the Reopening Working Group and the Arts and Institutions Committee. This is the second in a series that the Reopening Working Group is doing called Restarting Together, and this is Restarting Together Museums. I'm going to go quickly over how the evening will run. The importance of this is really for this to be a dialogue among, of course, for the community, but really among the arts administrators who have joined us on the panel tonight. And so I'm going to ask, just because this is a joint meeting and we have a lot of, we have 2 different committees on here from the board, I'm going to ask if you're a CB2 board member to turn your camera off during the first portion of our meeting. So I'll go through the agenda quickly to give you an idea and let you know who we have here with us tonight. So the way this is going to go, I'm calling the meeting to order now. I'm Valerie De La Rosa. I chair the Reopening Working Group. My co-host tonight is Robin Rothstein, who is the chair of CB2's Arts and Institutions Committee. Our agenda for tonight is we are going to, we have a great night for you ahead. We're going to have 4 presentations on reopening plans and reopening updates from the following. We'll have the Whitney presenting first. So we have Jane Carey and we have Jane Carey, Amy Roth, and Heidi Arude from the Whitney, and they will be giving us an update. As you know, they reopened up earlier this month. Their presentation will be a little longer because they will also be going over a task force and some other larger initiatives with the state's reopening that we hope will provide some of the other institutions with additional info as well. Then we'll have, following that, we'll have 3 more presentations. We'll have Jay Sanders from the Artist Space in Soho. We'll have Gary Urbanowitz from New York City Fire Museum and Joseph Scelsa from Italian American Museum. Wrapping that up, and then we will have a panel discussion, and I've got some other, as you can probably see here, I have some other individuals joining us tonight for the panel. Everyone who's here was asked to present. Everyone was offered an opportunity to present to the community, so just making sure everyone knows that, but due to logistics and not having certain reopening plans ready to disclose publicly, we are going to have them still join us in this format for the panel discussion. So I'll go through those. We have Sasha Davis from the Renee and Chaim Gross Foundation, Nancy Yao Masbach from Museum of Chinese in America, Stamatina Gregory from the Leslie-Lohman Museum of Art, Suzanne Mex from the Center for Architecture, also AIA New York, and Seth Cameron from the Children's Museum of the Arts. We will be live streaming this to Facebook probably in the next few minutes. So this will be public, so please feel free. So please keep that in mind, that it will be live streamed. And other than that, Robin, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm happy for this turnout, and I'm really excited to hear what everybody has to say and the following discussion.
Great, and please know that we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions throughout the presentations, feel free to put those in real time, and then we'll go through those during the panel discussion and try to kind of summarize those. We just ask that everything be kept on topic as it relates to the reopening of these institutions, because that's what our goal here tonight is, to talk about that and to offer collaboration between the institutions as well. So with that, we will go with our first presenter. Jane, are you guys ready to go? And what else can I help with to get you started.
Thanks, Valerie. Thanks for that introduction. I know Amy Roth is in the attendees list too, so if we have a moment to elevate her, it would be great to have her join us on video. And I just want to thank you, Valerie and Robin, and all members of the committee for creating this moment for us to come together. And for me, one of the positive things over the last few months is how all of our communities have really come together to support one another, including the cultural community. So I'm thankful for you for creating the space for us to continue to exchange learnings and information with one another. You know, Amy will share more on our work with our external community. But like Valerie mentioned, I'm joined here tonight by Amy Roth, our Co-Chief Operating Officer, and ID Arurede, our Co-Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer. So the two of them have really been leading the Whitney's planning internally and externally to get us prepared for reopening, which we were so thrilled to do a few weeks ago. They both will speak about our closure, the internal and external planning work we've done, and a bit on what we have to look forward to ahead. So I'm going to put on a very brief PowerPoint presentation and pass the mic off to ID, who will get us started.
Well, thank you, Jane. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Robin, for organizing this evening, and really thanks for inviting us to participate from the Whitney. As Jane said, my name is ID. Along with my co-COO, Amy Roth, we'll sort of talk through our experience with the closure and reopening. You know, and also I want to say thank you to CB2. It's interesting, I live, work, and play within the boundaries of CB2. So in many ways I say I don't actually live in New York City, I live in CB2. So this is very meaningful. It's also nice to see friends, colleagues, and former colleagues on the screen, by the way. So hello all. Before we go into the museum's reopening, though, it might be helpful just to do a very quick flashback to the world as it was 6 months ago when we closed. Interestingly, I mean, clearly in the interest of protecting the well-being of our staff, our volunteers, our visitors, and also following the public health guidance from local, state, and federal authorities, we made the really, you know, painful but right decision to close along with many of our peers back in March, in the middle of March. And interestingly, I think prior to that point, the only time the Whitney had ever been closed for that length of time was back in 2015 when we closed for the move downtown from the Upper East Side. And at the time, obviously, it was an exciting move. We knew exactly when we would be reopening. We had a new neighborhood, a new community, a new building to look forward to. This was enormously different because there was so much uncertainty. And in fact, if you flash back to March, at the time when we closed, we said, you know, we'll reassess the closure in a couple of weeks and we'll let you know what our opening date is. Little did we know that nearly 6 months later, we'd still be on that sort of long road to attempting to reopen. But clearly, right from the day that we closed, our focus immediately turned to a couple of things. One was our dedication to our mission and our responsibility to keep up that obligation and service to artists and to the public, and how we would do that in an environment where our building was physically closed, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the other was to ensure that whenever we were permitted to reopen, that we would indeed be able to be ready, we'd be able to do it safely and you know, thoughtfully. And so that work had to happen from the day we closed, and my colleague Amy led a lot of that thinking, a lot of that effort, not just within the Whitney, but across our peers as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So are you putting up slides, Jane?
Yeah, I think we're just trying to work on how to make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine. We can go without slides. What you may have seen if we had slides up is you would have seen one beautiful image of our building, vibrant and full of people and activity, and a subsequent image shortly after we closed, which showed, and there it looks like, there it is. And you know, so this hit the press. You had that vibrant photo on the prior slide, and this really was us right after closure. But we'll talk about, you know, really the significance of a building and a physical space and what we do, but also the opportunities that we've leaned into and what we've learned, and in terms of engaging audiences and delivering on our mission outside of a building and in the broader community. So we can go to the next slide. I'll pass it on to Amy.
Great, thanks ID, and thanks to CB2. We love collaborating, partnering, working with all of you. So one of our immediate steps, which ID was leading towards, was to build 2 task forces, one internal and one external. You can see on this slide a little bit about the New York City Museum's reopening task force. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the Whitney's internal task force and our internal reopening efforts. We initiated a situational response team pre-closure that was responsible for managing the museum's closing and eventually for planning our reopening. Made up of 22 staff members from across all areas of museum operations. The situational response team was and is tasked with developing the plans, processes, and protocols in alignment with federal and state guidance to be ready to return to work and reopen the museum to visitors. So that became our #1 objective after we indeed closed the museum in March. At our weekly meetings, our SRT group would tackle operational interdependencies related to reopening. There were many and a lot of uncertainty, as I'm sure you can all imagine, and advise on critical business continuity decisions, including when the museum would be ready to welcome back visitors. And alongside this internal work, as ID mentioned, the Whitney led the charge in creating the New York City Museum's Reopening Task Force, as you see here on the slide, which is made up of 26 institutions across all 5 boroughs. The Cross Museum Group was really modeled off the work and I would say inspired by the work of hospitals who were working in an unprecedentedly collaborative way in the early days of the pandemic. And the purpose of joining museums across the 5 boroughs together was to create standardized protocols so that visitors would have more or less a common or uniform experience wherever they visited. We felt that this was very important in returning our staffs to our buildings safely, as well as in imbuing some visitor confidence in returning to museums safely. The group was mainly and continues to meet weekly, so I should say is mainly made up of chief operating officers across museums that you see here on the slide. We do still meet today. We tackle topics from HR, visitor operations, communications, and because the guidelines continue to change so rapidly, we are constantly monitoring the situation and making adaptations as needed. So as mentioned, a huge part of our work was to create common protocols for museums to reopen, and these protocols, these guidelines are now available on the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs website. And just a few key protocols implemented at museums across New York City. So a lot of us are now open, some are still to be open, but you should see some commonalities. Capacity and floor plan analyses to ensure 6 feet of space between individuals, and some of this should sound very familiar at this point. Staggered visitation, such as time ticketing, which enables us to smooth out peaks in crowding or line formation and have really a seamless arrivals process. Development of single direction circulation or travel routes through the building, so one-way direction, which I'm sure you're experiencing in other venues. Increased signage on expectations for visitor behavior. We have at the Whitney, for example, more than 150 discrete signage instances. So signage is a big deal. Staff training on COVID health and safety, as well as new operational protocols. Visitor health screenings. When you visit the Whitney, you might not notice it, but you will be walking by a thermal imaging camera. So we're taking temperatures on arrival. Modified point of sales stations, contactless pay options, removing or reducing high contact materials, and so on and so forth. And I think that the biggest one of which really is meant to ensure staff have a confidence and safety in returning to our workplace. And we have mandatory health screening assessments for all staff before we enter the building. So I'll turn it back over to ID. That's a little taste of what's going on at the museums across the city.
Thanks, Amy. Everything's different. I'm hearing a bit of an echo. Are you hearing an echo from me? Hopefully I'm fine. All right. So there is a quote that we cite often at the Whitney, or at least people I talk to cite pretty often, and the quote is, "The Whitney is an idea, not a building." And it was a quote from Flora Miller Biddle, who's the granddaughter of the museum's founder, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney. And at no point in our history, I think, has that sort of quote been more true or more salient. The idea that when we no longer had a physical space, a building to rely on in terms of delivering our programs and engaging with artists and our audiences, we had to think very differently and very quickly in terms of continue to deliver on our programs and continue to be true to our mission, particularly at a time when you could argue New Yorkers were seeking these experiences, chances to connect, chances to find inspiration and to have their spirits lifted, much more so than ever, and looking to art as a way of doing it. So we leaned pretty heavily into in this new virtual environment, into our digital platforms. Old existing programs were put online, but also new programs developed to reach people sort of at their point of need and in a way that resonated for them. Interestingly, we serve over 24,000 students annually through our school programs, and 80% of those come from New York City public schools. So picture us closing in the middle of the school year, and also thinking about how we augment and buttress the curriculum in public schools. So in certain areas, we actually ramped up programming as opposed to ramping down, which you might think when a museum is close to the public. On this slide, you'll see a number of examples of the online programming and events that we hosted. One was Whitney Screens, which really, I think, gave a chance to put a spotlight on the Whitney's extensive collection of video and new media art, perhaps in a way that we might not have had the building been open, frankly, when these works are competing with so many other instances of our programming. And so we had every Friday special screenings of video works in our collection, all by emerging artists, and really well-attended programs, again, illuminating sort of well-known video works that hadn't been seen for a while, as well as works by new and emerging artists. One of our most popular programs was called Art History from Home, which over the course of our closure over 5.5 months was seen or was attended by 16,000 people in nearly 50 sessions. And these were weekly online talks, illuminating particular works in our collection, bringing old favorites to light, illuminating sort of lesser known works, and doing this in intimate settings virtually, and perhaps in ways that may not have or wouldn't have been done within our building had we not been closed. Art Making from Home was a chance for our audiences to engage and roll up their sleeves and sort of use common materials to make art at home under the guidance of Whitney educators. The Summer Studios, again, outside of school, as a program that had existed before but went online over this period. So there really was an immediate pivot to continuing to deliver and engage with our communities. And interestingly, those who most often think of the Whitney as their own sort of neighborhood museum were those who are most likely to seek us out, certainly online, but also we saw an expansion of our audiences to reaching new audiences, which was nice and I think gratifying as well. We can go to the next slide, Jane, thank you. Preparing for reopening. I think Amy actually touched on a lot of the points here. I think that the headline here is, in thinking about reopening, health and safety without a doubt were our #1 priority, and everything that was done in planning for reopening was done within that framework and that context. It's interesting, I'll recall back in April or May, we had members of our facilities teams already buying, face masks and sanitizers and stocking up on supplies that we knew we would need at some point before there was a run on those things, as just one small example. But, as Amy said, timed ticketing for crowd and capacity controls, standard. I'm sure you see that at any place that welcomes the public these days. But, the systems that make those things work and make them not just work, but work seamlessly, we really started working on and planning back in the spring, back in April, May. Almost contactless entry, mobile guides, building guides on your mobile devices, the idea was to ensure that the experience was not only maintained, but ideally superlative in this environment. And recall at the time of planning for reopening, we truly didn't even know what our capacity constraints would be. So this was happening well before that was known. As members of our community, I hope many of you have had a chance to visit since we're reopened. Our audiences are coming, and we believe we take post-visit surveys, we believe are being not only delighted, but also feel safe and comfortable here. The Net Promoter Score for our visitors who've attended so far have been positive and high. And it's something that our team takes great pride in and it pays a lot of attention to. But everything is different, but yet the same, I would say. It's your same old Whitney, but really with health and safety as our primary goal and objective. We can go to the next slide. Thanks, Jane.
I love this slide because here's where we get to talk about the future. Yeah, the Whitney is open again. We could not be more excited to finally have visitors back. 6 months is a long time to be closed. And we're all enjoying the Whitney again, and I hope all of you in CB2 are as well. So what's next? In the near term, the museum has opted to extend all of our spring, so last spring, exhibitions through at least the fall and many through the new year, as many ending even the end of January. So some of our highlights and our most popular exhibitions, don't miss them, but you also have some time to come visit us if you haven't already. And then we're also looking forward, as you can see here, to the opening of the Day's End project installation in late fall of this calendar year, which is definitely going to be a moment for the entire community to celebrate. I think that, nothing more suiting than this incredible project by David Hammonds. So long term, we are going forward strong, and we hope to welcome more visitors back soon. Hopefully the government will give us a little bit of leeway there and enable us to move from 25% capacity north. But whatever happens, the Whitney is here and we will be here for a long while. So thank you very much for inviting us to present tonight.
Thank you so much. So thank you, Jane, Amy, and ID for that really comprehensive overview of what you guys have been thinking about, what you put together, and what is in the future, which is also, this is very promising to see. We're going to move on to our next presenter. Again, if you have questions for any of our presenters or during the panel discussion, you can add those in the chat. Next presenting, we have, let me just pull this up. We have Jay Sanders from Artist Space. Jay, are you ready to go?
I am. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks so much, Valerie and Robin, for inviting me to represent Artist Space and for this chance for us as the nonprofit cultural institutions in CB2 vicinity to be in dialogue. So, and to my close friends at the Whitney, it's really great to see you all. I'm gonna do a little screen share for a bit here and then I won't need it the whole time. Okay. All right. Is that working? Are you seeing this kind of map image? Okay, good. So Artist Space, as many of you know, was founded in 1972 and has lived its entire institutional life now, almost 50 years in the Soho, Tribeca area. So this is actually a map of all of our locations, which are within about a 10-block radius. We've had 6 locations in Soho and Tribeca. And we were really founded in this era when Soho was the kind of burgeoning district for emerging artists working in very experimental forms. And we were founded to kind of keep step and present and be a center, both presentationally and in terms of organization for artists. And that's a mission that's always updating itself. 2019 was meant to be our challenging year. We undertook a large building campaign and renovated this space on Cortlandt Alley. And we opened December 6th, 2019, after a year being closed. And so we basically had like 100 incredible days of exhibitions, performances, gatherings, and live events before the coronavirus shut down in March. And just to quickly give you an overview, here's our alleyway. These were the exhibitions that were paused, Jana Euler and a great archival show by Adrian Kennedy that we did in collaboration with Hilton Alls. So immediately all of our exhibitions went online. So we worked with our artists to conceive kind of online representations of the show. In the case of Jana, it was a series of videos that she directed us to make with this show of Adrian. Hilton did a kind of audio tour that we turned into a slideshow. So we were trying to make the shows accessible and visible, and then all of our public programming moved to Zoom. And it was important to us to kind of look at our broader community, at cultural organizations and presenters who weren't as equipped to make that transformation. So for us, an important one was the Segue reading series. This is a longstanding, also over 40-year experimental poetry, performance, literature series. And we took on the kind of co-production of that as a Zoom event for all the spring, and that'll continue for the fall. And these kind of community gatherings became essential. So every Sunday we hosted a reading at 6 p.m. and actually had very significant attendance and sort of brought the poetry community together. Like Jane and Amy at the Whitney said, this has been a profound time of realizing the importance of community organizing. And in our case, this took the form of sort of 3 interlocking networks. We were in touch with a lot of our museum peers, at various scales, mutual support, a lot of shared information. Then there became an informal consortium of the leadership of kind of our strata of spaces. So the non-collecting institutions in New York that, like the Kitchen, White Columns, the Drawing Center, which is also in Soho. And these were bi-weekly calls about fiscal issues and reopening procedures and kind of staff and just how we were gonna survive all this. And then which people may have read about, this kind of very important Culture at 3 call that Terrence Sacramone from Queen's Theater and Lucy Sexton at New Yorkers for Culture and Arts started. And this was, this continues to this day, every day at 3 o'clock, and it's like 100 to 250 cultural leaders on the phone every day, sharing information on all aspects of how to navigate this period. And I have to say, these have all been really essential for both emotionally and tactically to move us all forward in what continues to be a really uncertain period. So Artist Space, I think I'll just show you a little bit more of this public programs, and I'm gonna turn the screen share off because that's all I had. We reopened on September 4th and with limited hours, Wednesday through Saturday, noon to 6. And like the Whitney, staff safety was our utmost urgent priority. And so we have a reservation system, we've limited our capacities, and that's all guided by the design of each exhibition. We're maintaining contact tracing information of everyone that comes into the space, minimizing touch points, very extensive cleaning protocols, and it's been honestly successful in the last 3 weeks. So it was very cathartic to reopen and kind of feel our community begin to revisit and experience art and experience us in the space. Now we've closed the shows that you just saw, and we're installing a next exhibition which will open around October 21st. And I would say in terms of future programs, we too have been thinking really hard about what our current state of affairs is. And Artist Space is a small enough organization that we can pivot sort of conditionally and collaborate with artists in really intimate ways to kind of make shows and projects that deal with shifting conditions of all sorts in our city. So I think for 2021, these will be new artist commissions where we'll look very carefully at what's the site. Is that our physical space? Is that online? Is that a kind of hybrid we can create and hopefully very much co-produce what an exhibition program looks like that will take all these kind of challenges into consideration. Definitely a big difficulty has been the lack of being able to publicly gather for public events, as that's been a huge part of Artispace. And again, through online and other avenues, we're working toward making the best conditions of that as possible, and then speaking with our peers as we move into 2021 and hopefully can do more and more on site. So I'll leave it there, just brief, and happy to answer questions as they come up. But thank you so much.
Great, thank you. I had to get to the unmute button. Jay, thank you so much for that update, and for you touched on a lot of great points that I think are going to come up in the panel discussion. So thank you so much for being here and participating. Next, we're going to move on to Gary Urbanowitz from the New York City Fire Museum. Gary, are you ready to go? Okay, great. And you should be able to screen share if you have anything to share. I think you mentioned that you did. So I'd love to hear an update.
Okay, hopefully everybody sees that now. Well, thanks, and thanks for inviting us to participate. We like participating with CB2. You've been good friends to us. Bob, I see, is on the Zoom. You've held meetings here, and I know Bob attends a lot of our events, so we appreciate the relationship that we have with CB2. So it's certainly welcome the opportunity to be able to speak at today's meeting. We face a lot of challenges too. There's a lot of people don't understand our museum. In fact, it's often called the hidden gem in New York City. But although we're the official museum of the New York City Fire Department, it's not run by the department. The department owns the building and the collection, but in 1981, they formed a nonprofit organization to relieve the city of the financial burden of running the museum. So we've been self-sufficient ever since then. So when we had to close back in March, we didn't have the city to fall back on to pay our salaries or do any of the other work that needs to be done to make sure that we were able to open again when this is all over. I'm not sure how I advance my slides here. Oh, there we go. So it was great to hear about some of the work that was done by the task force. Unfortunately, we were unaware of that. I don't know how that information ever disseminated down to our small museums like us, but we formulated our reopening plans totally on our own. We had the input that we had from the state or available from the state, but everything else we did was unfortunately without all that hard work that you guys put into it. So we're pleased with the way things turned out. We certainly had to go through a paradigm shift in the way we were delivering our message and achieving our mission. The first thing we did was scale back from 7 days a week to 5 days a week. What that did was also eliminate the need for one staff person. We have a very small staff we had a small staff of 7, we're down to 6. 4 of those are salaried, 2 are hourly. That's what we rely on for our operations. So we did have the good fortune, as many people were, to receive the PPP forgivable loan from the feds, and as well as another grant from the New York Community Trust to at least be able to maintain our staff, which because of the small size, we felt was very important, so that we could, when we did open again, as we were before, we would be able to do so without having to go through learning curves and with the full knowledge that we've gained over the years of operation, exactly how it is that we do operate. We did change to online pre-purchase of tickets, which allowed us to then control the amount of people within the building. We knew the capacity of the building was actually much higher than we felt comfortable with admitting into the exhibit spaces. If you haven't been here, we're in an old firehouse that was built in 1904. It has 3 floors plus a basement. The 3rd floor is an exhibit space and not part of the exhibits, is an event space that is not part of the exhibit. So we have only 2 floors of about 3,000 square foot each that are for visitors. So we decided to limit our capacity to lower than actually our building capacity, or 25% of our building capacity, to what we felt comfortable with. So we sell tickets on the range of 30 per hour. We estimated that most people go through the museum in about 45 minutes. And since we reopened on September 9th, we found that to be pretty accurate. So that works very well for us. So when you book your tickets online, you also get a screen that gives you our health and safety pointers, both for what we expect of visitors as well as what we provide to visitors and what we're doing to protect them and what we need them to do to participate in those protective measures we're taking for our staff and other visitors. Some of those include, because of our singular entrance, we created this simple one side enter, one side exit type of system so that we can at least have some distinction between the two and try to keep people separated to the best extent we can in that process. When you enter the museum and check in at the gift shop counter, as you can see, we put our big sneeze guards up. Just from a sheer economic standpoint, we chose to construct those ourselves as opposed to go with any outside contractors or fancy systems. This works very well for us and also accommodates all the shoppers that come through the museum gift shop after their tours. We also, as I heard previously mentioned, we did lay out the pathway through the museum, which is challenging because, again, this is an old firehouse that was converted into a museum. It wasn't built as a museum, it was converted. And again, when it was converted, I don't think they actually used museum planners for it. So we had that challenge. And our current collection manager worked on a system of trying to herd people through the various areas of the museum. And it has worked well so far. I think what we've experienced, and I imagine others will if they haven't already experienced, is that visitors will do what they want to do. I mean, you could lay it out for them, but you're kind of at their mercy as to what they want to do. We don't have the staff to go and police them and try to keep them in line with the flow of traffic, but because of our small groups that are coming through, this seems to be working for us right now with some minor exception. The other thing we did, which we've never done before, is we do have two staircases in the building. There's one somewhat ornate staircase on one level of the building, one area of the building, right off our main lobby that you could see in the center image. That was the primary staircase. The other staircase, which you see on the left side of your screen, we had actually closed off the visitors. We didn't want them to use that. It's well lit, but it's kind of obscure. We didn't feel comfortable with people going through that ever before. But now we've decided that we wanted to keep one-way directions between the two levels. So we've opened up the second staircase, again with the directional arrows to try to herd people through those, with the primary staircase now being the exit that takes you through back down into the lobby in front of the gift shop, which is Museum 101. And also we do have an elevator, so we can accommodate handicapped individuals. We have restricted the use of that elevator to only 2 people. It's a rather unusual large elevator that was installed in 1947 when the medical division of the fire department was in this building, and it was created for stretchers. So it's kind of deep, but we felt comfortable only limiting that to 2 people. And we asked people not to use that if they can physically use the staircases instead. Our bathrooms, again, we have visitor bathrooms on a mezzanine level. We limit the use to 1 person at a time. We had a donation from one of our board members of hands-free devices, which we retrofitted. So we have hands-free towel dispensers, hands-free soap and sanitizer, which also helps with our disease prevention and contamination process. That was very fortunate for us to get that donation and helped us a great deal. We also, based on the New York Forward guidelines, did create our cleaning protocols. We have 1 staff person who is our janitor, building maintenance person. So we've trained him in these protocols, exactly how these things are to be cleaned. We emphasize, which I think is something that's lacking in some training programs, that dwell time of the decontamination and disinfectants is very important. You don't just wet a towel and wipe down a surface. That decontaminant or disinfectant has to reside there for a period of time and then be wiped off. It's a 3-step process, and fortunately, our person is very good at that. And we have created this sequential cleaning of the building. And in fact, we created a log sheet so that he checks in each time he cleans the various areas that we feel are the important ones to decontaminate. So that occurs on a regular basis. We obviously have suffered some adverse impacts of having to change the way we're presenting ourselves to our visitors. One is that we had to close certain areas of the museum. We felt that those areas which had high touch points or were designed to accommodate large volumes of people were too difficult to control in terms of maintaining a small group or 6 feet separation in those areas. So one of them was a video room where we have a large library of both educational as well as informative and entertaining videos on fire prevention, fire safety, the fire service, and about the fire department. So we shut down that room. That room is not currently available to our visitors. The second one, which is one of our bigger disappointments, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well, is our Fire Safety Learning Center. This is our fire safety and prevention training room where we have school groups come through. Prior to 2016, this room was only used as part of our fire safety education program, which was an escorted program for school children. After it was renovated and the renovation was completed in 2016, we were able to open it to the public. But because it's a very tactile area, we needed to close that as well. So those are two areas of the museum we needed to close to feel that we were providing adequate safety for our visitors. Other simple things, you'll see here just a screen, a video screen, that had a loop display of a very interesting story about the New York City Fire Department with interviews with firefighters, how the fire department operates. But because it's in a small area, a relatively small screen, we didn't want people to congregate in front of it. So we opted to leave that off so that people would not do that. So these are some of the critical decisions that we had to make. And our staff was meeting prior to our opening for actually several months to start talking about how we would approach this. And these are some of the things that we discussed and implemented once we did open on September 9th. Clearly, like all of our other cultural institutions in the city and across the country, and I assume you know, for those of you who participate in the museum associations like Museums Council of New York City and Museum Association of New York, the Alliance of American Museums did a study that showed that about 1/3 of America's museums anticipate closing permanently as a result of the pandemic. So we certainly don't want to be amongst those, but we certainly are feeling the economic impacts of having been closed for 6 months and seeing a loss of revenue based on lower visits. We have 3 major streams of revenue. Again, we did not get support from the city, financial support from the city. We have visitors from all over the world. I chose these photographs because we don't take pictures of the people who come in who are domestic, I must say, but our international visitors often get photographs. So as you can see, we get firefighters from around the world. They're not our only visitors. We had visitors from Korea and Ireland that were government officials who wanted to see different government operations in New York City and included us on their tour. But we get the average person too, from around the country, from local people in New York City. A lot of families come in through our museum, so we're very fortunate to see those. We have about 40,000 visitors per year, which is not large compared to some of the other cultural institutions in the city, but still, we serve a good size audience. We're very pleased with that. We also have a very powerful and very important fire safety education program. We do this in conjunction with the New York City Fire Department, and it consists of 3 main components. School children come in on school field trips. They first view a video in that video room. That's an age-appropriate video about fire safety, fire prevention, things like stop, drop, and roll, not playing with matches, those sorts of things. They then get a history tour of the museum, and you see one of our docents there, a retired New York City firefighter, giving one of those tours. And then you see in the larger picture, which is a video I chose not to play for you today, they're taken to the Fire Safety Education, Fire Safety Learning Center, where they actually experience the ability to escape from a room full of smoke. It's 2 rooms. They get a lesson on fire safety. In one room, they're moved into the second room, and while they're in the second room, the first one is filled with artificial smoke. It's really nothing more than fog. It's not dangerous at all. And they have to learn how to crawl out. And frankly, we know, although we can't quantify it, this saves lives. Children learn how to safely escape from a building or a room or an apartment or a home that's full of smoke. One of the doors has a heat panel in it, so they learn to feel with the back of their hand. If a door is warm, you don't escape through it. When you leave that first room, you close the door behind you, and you know there was a fire in the Bronx where 7 people died simply because the door wasn't closed. This is a very, very powerful program. But because of the tactile sense of the room, and you could also see we have interactive devices now in that room where you see a young man planning out an escape route for his apartment, we felt that we had to close that room. So that doesn't bring the school groups in. It's not even us who are denying the school groups entry. We know that schools are not planning field trips right now. So this will have a very large impact Although the cost is very minor, it's like $5 per child. It really hurts us because we have about 50,000 children a year coming through that program. Oops. Our other third revenue, or I guess our second revenue source is our third floor event space. And again, I know CB2 and some of the organizations within CB2 have made use of that space. It's a beautiful loft space on the third floor, brick-lined walls, beautiful hardwood floor. We've had everything from fashion shows to corporate meetings to concerts to weddings up in that space, retirement parties. That's a major source of revenue for us. We also have a junior firefighter birthday party package where families come in to have birthday parties. They get a package that includes, as you can see, a themed cake. We do a treasure hunt throughout the museum. They get storytelling. They get firefighter hats and activities to do. Again, because of the restrictions on the space and the allotment of people that can occupy that space of no more than 50, that's been impacted. We've had several inquiries. One inquiry for a rental of 175 people. We could not accept that rental. We had a request for a junior firefighter birthday party. We couldn't fulfill that, but right now the staff and I are working on an option for that. We're trying to come up with an alternative for that will remove some of the options that come out part of that package, but hopefully we could still have some children coming through enjoying their birthdays here and enjoying everything else the museum has to offer them as well. And the third revenue stream is our gift shop, like most museums. We do have both the bricks and mortar and online presence. We're trying to increase our visibility through our social networks and social platforms, and we are increasing our online sales through that. But obviously, it's the people who come through that space to purchase gifts while they're here. The less people we see, the less revenue we generate from that source as well. And as some of you know, because a lot of you I know attended, we have some community events. The image on the left is the lineup, which you can see from midpoint, actually about 2/3 of the way down Spring Street, all the way back to Varick Street for our spring egg hunt that we do in the museum. And on the right side, our Santa Rescue. We can't hold either of those. So not only are those fundraising events for us, but they're also events that we feel contributes to our presence in the community and helps us achieve our mission of trying to educate people on fire safety and what we do here at the museum. And also, Bob Gormley likes to attend this annual event. Our annual main fundraiser is our fire department cook-off, which is very widely attended. We have a wonderful turnout for that. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year. It's held the first Thursday of November each year, and we will not be holding that this year. We're looking at some options for other virtual events, virtual auctions perhaps, to replace that this year. But we're currently working on that. We have not come up with that solution yet. But again, this is a loss of revenue that will significantly impact our operations. Now, like all of you, we've had to look for other opportunities that this situation presents us with, and we've come up with several. One of the first things we've done is to create podcasts. We now broadcast podcasts that are available through our website, but that are announced throughout our social networks. They occur once per month. They're on a history topic that have 3 segments that educate people who are interested in the history of the New York City Fire Department, firefighting in New York City, and they're just fun to do. And we're having more and more people come to that, and it's also a way to make people more aware of what we do here at the museum and hopefully generate more visitation as we proceed. This September 11th, which obviously you're all aware of the importance of the September 11th to the fire department as one element of that day. We have an annual ceremony here, a wreath-laying ceremony. We could not have that this year because we have so many people who come to attend. If you visited that memorial, it's a relatively small room, so even on that day, we really cram people in, and the museum is full of people. Several hundred people attend on that day. So we were open, fortunately. That's why we opened on September 9th, so we could have that day. But we did broadcast that morning a virtual wreath-laying ceremony that was carried on all of our, again, social media platforms as well as through the fire department. And we were open that day. We don't charge an admission that day. And we had a reasonable turnout, around 100 people that day, as opposed to about 3 times that amount that we normally have. The other thing we're trying to do is plan a grand re-entrance. I won't say reopening because we're already reopened, but a grand re-entrance. So what we decided upon is to have an exhibition that we're calling Unmasking Our Heroes that will be launched off of a lot of the gratitude that the fire department has been receiving, even at the local fire station and EMS station level, of gratitude expressed by the citizens of New York to thank the EMS and fire personnel of the FDNY who responded as first responders to their calls for help during the COVID epidemic. So we've been collecting from those fire stations and EMS stations the different banners, posters. We have videos, we've got thank you cards, we've got thank you notes that have been coming through our website at nycfiremuseum.org/thanksfdny that'll be coming through on that. So that's going to be a major exhibition that we're launching, and we're actually going through a fundraising campaign to help us do that, as well as to generally fundraise to allow us to continue to be open until we can reach that fully opened point. What does the future hold? Like for all of you, we're not sure. Our fiscal year runs from July 1 through June 30th. Clearly, our present fiscal year began during the pandemic. The board chose to request that I prepare quarterly budgets as opposed to an annual, because they felt the annual was just, to use this graphic, gazing into the crystal ball. It was anybody's guess based on what we thought might happen. As somebody said earlier, we never thought this was going to last as long as it has. So we managed to go through the first quarter based on the fundraising that we did, the grants that we received. We looked pretty good for the second quarter, which is the next budget tranche that we've got. But the next challenge will be, what does 2021 look for us, and where will we be going from here? Again, we're kind of off the tourist path, although we do have a large specialty audience that we attract. We do have quite a few more people walking through, coming in off the street, which we hope to attract more. As those of you who are in CB2 know, the Hudson Square region is growing by leaps and bounds. Directly across the street from the museum is the Disney ABC7 headquarters that are being constructed. 2 blocks away are the Google headquarters. So this is a changing neighborhood that we're very, very excited to be part of. We know that the future holds great things for us. So we're really just trying to maintain our status quo so that we can move forward and be here when they all get here as well. So, again, thank you for inviting us to present today and to tell our story to all of you. And we look forward to working with all of you to make sure that CB2 does well and all the cultural institutions we have in this area thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gary. That was a really wonderful update. And again, I got some good question ideas from there. But thank you so much for that update on the New York City Fire Museum. Very important to our district. We're going to move on now to Joseph Scelsa with the Italian American Museum. Joseph, are you ready to go?
Absolutely.
Great.
Valerie, I want to thank you very much and the whole board, for allowing us to present. We're not in operation, as you know, but we are planning our operation. And I think I have a lot of things to share, but I'm learning a lot also from the other institutions, and this is very, very helpful. So I thank you, and I hope to be a participant in the future in more of these forums like this. Well, let me give you a little background as to how the museum started. Some of you may know that we're on Mulberry Street, but before we were on Mulberry Street, it started with an exhibition that we did at the New York Historical Society back in 1999, which was the Italians of New York: 5 Centuries of Struggle and Achievement. Was very successful. It was a very successful exhibition, and we realized as a result of it that people really wanted to have a museum. This is in front of the New York Historical Society, the entrance going in October 12, 1999. It closed on February 20th. We did a retrospective at the Italian consulate in New York City, and we found that, that people were clamoring for an Italian American museum in New York because there really wasn't one. The closest thing we have to it is the Garibaldi Museum on Staten Island. So with that in mind, I was able to get the the museum incorporated by the state. We became officially a museum on June 20th of 2001. And we were, because I was at the time the dean of the Calandra Italian American Institute, the City University of New York, and vice president of Queens College, we were able to run about 20 exhibits between then and the time we moved to Mulberry Street. We were a separate board, but we moved to Mulberry Street in 2008 in the old Stabile Bank headquarters, which is on the corner of Grand and Mulberry Street. I do have a screen share, but I don't have these on it, so I don't know if you can see this or not. If it's not clear, I won't even bother. I can see it. It's just not showing up. But on the corner of Grand and Mulberry Street, we had a small location, about 900 square feet that we were using. We always intended that we would have a larger facility, and though we owned the three buildings next to us, that building and the two next to us, they were very run down, as you can just imagine. Building between 1865 and 1895, every possible thing went wrong with them. But we were able to find a developer who would work with us. And what we did was we sold him some of the rights to the space and the air rights above it. And for that, they're building us out this museum, which will be on Mulberry Street. This will be the entrance to the new museum on Mulberry Street. Right next to it, you have the Van Rensselaer House, the brick building that's next to it. It's going to be a modern-looking structure, basically because we want to set something apart from what Mulberry Street has been noted for, what it looks like. We want it to become an attraction. What's inside will be more important than what's outside, except this will be a beacon, I believe, on Mulberry Street to attract people to learn about the Italian experience in America, and particularly in New York City. Everything from Pietro Cesare Alberti, whose stone marker you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, which was originally done by the Italian Historical Society of America, which was given to me by the Parks Department, given to the museum by the Parks Department a few years ago, when they replaced it with a plaque in the park instead. So they didn't know what to do with it, I guess. So they asked me if I wanted it, and I said, of course. So John LeCourt was the founder of the Historical Society. His name is on it, and Pietro Cesare Alberti was the first known Italian to come to New York through the Dutch East India Company in 1636. So that stone mark will be there. It's not going to be placed exactly where it is there, but it will be placed. This is you can see the old juxtaposed against the new, which we think is kind of striking. There'll be a 23-foot entrance as you walk into it, and as you can see in the next slide, I'm going to put up. I don't know if it's not going to be that color, but that's just for dramatic purposes. It's all going to be muted. But as you can see, as you follow the slide up to the ceiling, there's an atrium that will come down, and we'll go all the way down to the 4 floors of the museum. We have 7,000 square feet now, as opposed to the 900 that we had before. And on those different floors, we'll obviously be having different exhibitions. We're working with 2 designers. We work with Paulson Wilker, who did some of the design work for us. And we're also working with Lucy Creative. Those of you in the museum world who are out there, I'm sure you're familiar with some of those names. But they're working on it now for us, which will occupy 2 floors of the museum, which will start with the very beginning of the Italians coming to New York and go everything up until today, so that we'll have everything in between. We'll have an elevator, which will go for 4 floors, which will be handicap accessible. There will be, and since we're all talking about COVID, we probably will not be opening, if the very earliest at the end of next year, with the delays in construction and everything. So we're hopeful that by that time, all of us will be out of this mess that COVID has caused. But if it doesn't, we are planning also to have timed entry, to also have signage and how people will be able to enter through the building and go throughout it. Next slide. This is the mezzanine section of the building, which also will house which will house displays. We'll be housing the Enrico Caruso collection also within the building. This of course is that's a Frank Stella. I'd be so lucky to have it, but like it's just being put up there for display purposes. But to give you an idea as to what the space might look like when it's completed. On the lowest level, we're going to have a theater. It's not a large theater. It'll seat about 45 people, but it'll be great for school groups. One of the problems that we had over the last, since 2008 when we opened up, is we really couldn't accommodate the school groups. We ended up using a storefront next door to put the school groups in. I mean, we all make do, and it was quaint, but it really didn't serve its purpose. It really wasn't able to do what they intended. This will have the bells and whistles that you would expect to have in a small theater of that size, that we'll have to be able to do small presentations and lectures. We'll also be able to have movies and also to do the opening to the exhibit. There'll be more exhibition space on that floor as you walk out, and you walk around, which will start the permanent exhibition, which will go up to the next floor, which you can see here, which will also have part of that exhibition, and then followed by the grand entrance, which you can see here, which you can see all four layers of the museum. We originally anticipated that it would be open this spring. With COVID, that didn't happen, and probably we're lucky that it didn't happen, because obviously we would have to do a lot of additional planning at this time. Now we know that for sure we will not open until at least late 2021, possibly 2022. So this is what we have to look forward. This is what we have to look forward to. I don't have a lot more to present to you, so I'm going to be your shortest presenter this evening. But I do appreciate the opportunity to at least share with you what's happening on Mulberry Street, and I hope to be back again with more of the presentation, which will then give you the vision book and where we're going from here. So thank you again for allowing me to participate.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for that update on the exciting things to come at the Italian American Museum. It's been so wonderful to hear from just such a variety of institutions with different differences, but also a real common thread. I'm going to, let me turn the screen share off. Perfect. We're gonna move into our panel discussion. I'd really like to hear from some of the other panelists that have joined tonight. As I mentioned before, just for anyone that joined late, we also have joining, in addition to the presenters that you just saw, we also have Sasha Davis from the Renee and Chaim Gross Foundation, Nancy Yao Mosbach from Museum of Chinese in America, MoCA, Stamatina Gregory from Leslie-Lohman Museum of Art, and Suzanne Mex from the Center for Architecture, also AIA New York, and Seth Cameron from the Children's Museum of the Arts. For those of you across, this is for everyone, that haven't reopened yet, what is your biggest challenge right now? I'd love to hear kind of what, what's kind of going through your minds right now. If anyone wants to be first there, please don't be shy.
I can jump in. Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Nancy.
Super awesome to see all of you at this hour. And CB2 is awesome. I mean, we're just like on fire with the arts. It's so cool. And we have this like interesting position where we're north of Canal, but we cover the Museum of Chinese in America, which is a lot of the Chinese ancestry, some of it anchored in Chinatown. So we kind of straddle CB2 and CB3 in terms of content and geography. That being said, we were, our space doesn't make sense for us to open right now. So we've been pretty creative on a couple of different fronts, and we're really super thankful for the digital online options that we've had. So surprisingly, we went immediately to virtual. So we've had over 100 programs, about 4 on average a week, everything from Mocha Pride, Mocha Talks, Mocha Storytime, Mocha Treasures on the road, where we've kind of been able to leverage national contacts to talk about artifacts, just given the fire that we had on January 23rd. There's been this amazing silver lining of individuals who have come, said like, oh, you know what, my grandmother just gave me this, and this is so interesting. So we've been kind of telling those stories online. So in that way, we feel really grateful that we've been able to harness the digital. And what's interesting is we have 4 times more visitorship on virtual programming than we had feet through the door. So that's like super wild for us. And so we've had an average of about 300 participants on each call. And our museum, you know, the Fire Museum, I love it so much, and Italian American Museum. Can't wait for you guys to reopen. We should definitely collaborate on all fronts. But we only had about 50,000 visitors through the door. So that part's pretty wild. And now we're getting, you know, that number has just grown exponentially. But also we wanted to make sure that we were contributing to the space and the landscape. So after doing a quick assessment that we cannot do 25%, we only team of 15. So we did get PPE, but a lot of what we do, like we only make about 3% from admissions revenue. We just partnered with Pearl River Mart. So we had opened up the Mocha shop just about a year ago, but that revenue was just starting to generate. So we purposely don't really create a high bar for ticket revenue because we want to make sure our story is accessible. And again, the museum, Mocha is not by Chinese for Chinese. Mocha is by all for all. And we're very, very, you know, the word Chinese is not in our mission. It's really looking at the stories of people of Chinese ancestry to sort of bring our own identity into more full perspective. So what we're doing instead is actually launching on October 16th, 17th, and 18th. And I'm really sorry, we had this whole glitch with another part of CB2 where we were trying to get a 1-day closure of the thing, but we thought we were going through the city. It was really confusing to us. And then the message from CB2 ended up in my spam box, but I think we're trying to find another time to present. So we're doing window exhibits. So we have the frontage on Center Street and we have the frontage on Lafayette. So instead of bringing people into the space where we don't have the capacity to properly care for our guests, we're going to put in 100 feet of window exhibits. And that'll be accessible and that will be publicized. So we're really hoping that the traffic will come to CB2 for people to visit, like the new restaurant, Tiger Restaurant just opened. So we're partnering with them and trying to get the word out to get people to visit CB2. And then the other big news I wanted to share with all of you is after the fire, not only was our collections endangered and in 4 different places, but we didn't have a collection space anymore. So that space was obviously in CB3, but actually we found temp space in CB2. So we just started renting 3 Howard Street. We're in renovation right now. It's 4,000 square feet. And it's meant to be temp space. We have a 3-year and then an option for another 3-year and another 3 years. All of our collections will be consolidated there in that 4,000 square feet space. And then there'll be frontage where people will see, basically watch us conserve and repair the collections that have really kind of been of interest. And lastly, that space will, and you'll hear a lot more about this, but I thought I should plant the seed now, is we are in the process of purchasing the entire building. This has been a 5-year endeavor. It's been painful, very painful, but we are starting a $128 million campaign to really be a national anchor for the Chinese American journey. And the big news I wanted to share with all of you tonight, so happy that I could share it with you first and hot off the press, is that the Ford Foundation just announced today that they have chosen Mocha as one of 20 American cultural treasures. And we're in really good company with the Studio Museum, Alvin Ailey, and Apollo Theater in New York, and Museo del Barrio, and then around the Asian American landscape with Wing Luke, East West Players, and Japan American National Museum. So, and in sum, that you have one of the 20 American cultural treasures in your CB area, and I'm so happy to be your neighbor.
Nancy, that's amazing. I remember my congratulations. That's huge, and what a wonderful beacon of light during this time. That's really wonderful to hear. And I remember my first time in MoCA and just going, why did I never know about this? It was for a participatory budgeting citywide event a few years ago. So yeah. So that to me, I felt like I unlocked a treasure that I had no idea existed. So really great to hear about your mission and your new space in CB2. So you have more in CB2. That's so wonderful to hear. And there is the chair of the Quality of Life Committee is in the chat with a note. I'll make sure you guys connect afterwards about coming to the next meeting. So I'll make sure you get that in an email directly. I'll connect you with Joe Gallagher, who's the chair of the CB2 Quality of Life Committee. And he is also on the Reopening Working Group Committee too. So awesome. Okay, great. You guys are connected. Thank you so much for that. Is there anyone else who hasn't reopened that wants to talk about what's going on, kind of what, either what you've been up to or just what the challenges that you are experiencing? If anyone wants to hop in, please feel free.
I'm happy to speak because some of the things that I can say about Leslie-Lohman resonate with what Nancy was just saying. Congratulations, Nancy, on that well-deserved designation. And it's been wonderful to be in the Curators on Reopening group with Herb Tam. As we all, talk about, as we in various New York and Chicago institutions talk about the landscape of reopening. So I'm the chief curator at the Leslie-Lohman Museum of Art. And we closed, like everyone else, on March 13th. And right now we have just made the decision with our board that we will revisit when we plan to reopen in the middle of next month. So in the middle of October. And that's for a few reasons. We're a very small museum. I think that with capacity and with the necessary staff in the museum, in order to open, we would have to limit our visitors to like maybe a dozen people tops. So it hasn't felt super urgent to open for that reason. Also, we just finished deinstalling the major exhibition that we had installed that opened in February, Other Points of View, curated by Teresa True Latimer, which was about the work and kind of collective groups of Charles Henry Ford in the 30s and 40s. It was heartbreaking to take down because it had only been up for about a month. But right now we are planning, kind of like MoCA, to make our exhibitions public, both virtual and in our windows. So we have an annual commission for our facade called the Queer Power installation. And we're in the last 10 days of Joan E. Byron Jebb's installation, which has images from Pride protests from decades past. And Chitra Ganesh will be installing her work for the facade to open on October 18th. And we have other windows in the museum, the windows that face Worcester Street. And it's in those windows that we will have an installation by Rashad Newsom that will open for World AIDS Day on December 1st, to also coincide with a screening in Times Square and a virtual program that you'll be able to access if you interact with the wallpaper that will be in the windows. So we have never had two window installations at the same time, but these are specific times. And while we might reopen and show the video in the museum later this winter, we are planning for certain to open in February with a solo exhibition by Laura Aguilar. This comes along with a series of programs that we're planning on rolling out for later this fall and winter. One is a series of performances that are made to explore the possibilities of how we connect online called Remote Intimacies. And the first one will take place on October 7th with the artist Brontez Purnell. We're also launching a talk series with our fellows, and we're continuing a series that explores our collection, a video series called Queer Art TV. We've also been pouring a lot of energy into our Instagram and thinking about Instagram as a place where people are actually interacting and not just looking at images of our collection and past exhibitions, but also thinking about how we can use our platform and our following to amplify artists' voices. So we've set up a series of takeovers, and the most recent one was called Knowledge of Wounds by two Indigenous artists, Joseph Pierce and S.J. Norman. Knowledge of Wounds is their collective project. And they brought on 20 Indigenous artists from all over the world to do a takeover for one day each. So that happened 3 days a week for an entire moon cycle. So we're just trying to think about the different ways that we reach our audiences and how we can kind of change the nature of those interactions in this space of time when we're not open yet.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Samatina, and thank you for joining us tonight and for that update. If there's no other answers to that question, I'm going to grab one from the chat from Gary, who's asking, for those that have launched enhanced digital exhibitions, have you been able to monetize those to replace foot traffic to to your brick and mortar exhibits, or is it just to sustain your mission? And the second part of that is, what are you doing to replace traditional to replace lost traditional revenue? So if anyone from the panel wants to hop in on that for either one or two parts of that, please go ahead.
We are doing a virtual gala. We're going to lose about 4% of our total revenue. We have a tiny, tiny budget. We're 2.8 million, so super tiny. So, you know, obviously $128 million campaign is just, in the words of Lonnie Bunch, a fool's errand, but we're going to do it because it's important. But we are going to a virtual gala. We anticipate maybe bringing in less than 10% from the virtual gala, but we think it's important. I will say, I think the foundations have created massive systemic change, and they're trying to around funding and equity in funding. So that's been really great, and we've been applying to things, and we did get PPE. But I will say the New York City funding, obviously, we didn't get anything this year on that. So that really was tricky for us. And then you should all know also that we were hit by sort of the sentiment that this was a Wuhan virus and that it was in Chinatown. So by January 2nd, school groups had basically all canceled on us. So that was very kind of hurtful for us in the first 3 to 4 weeks, where there was no basis for that, but school groups were afraid. And because of the rhetoric coming from the current administration, then subsequently we shuttered March 15th, and obviously that was 100% lost. And the biggest thing is there's no rental revenue either. So rental revenue is a big part of our space, just like the Fire Museum, which, by the way, I put up there. We should do a progressive party of all CB2 arts and culturals after this whole thing ends. Wouldn't that be fun?
I love that idea. I saw that in the chat. I really do love that idea. That's great. That's, you know, if this, you know, if this can be a forum for ideas like that to come out, let's do it. I know Robin feels the same way as well. So that's awesome. If that comes out of this, that's so wonderful. Yes, exactly. The rental revenue seems to be a big loss, it sounds like, across the board. You know, I want to kind of step back and kind of step back for a second, and if anyone else wants to answer that question as well, either to Gary's question about the lost revenue, please just chime in, or if you have a question about for the other question about kind of you haven't reopened and you want to talk about that, please feel free to jump around. I'm happy to have you chime in. So if anyone wants to answer either of those,
Yeah.
I'll also, yeah.
Hi, this is
Hi.
from AIA New York on the Center for Architecture. I did want to just hop in. On the digital exhibitions, the Center for Architecture has definitely taken some of our projects and moved them into that digital space. We've done that more with exhibitions that we had from the past and trying to leverage that basically for missional purposes, as was noted. We do have one digital exhibition that's going to be opening next month, which is our October big month-long gala or festival of design for the city. And that's called Visualizing NYC. And that was a case where we had all the funding in place and we're planning it as a physical exhibition and just had to pivot and work with the curators and the others to bring that into the digital space to fulfill the plans that we already had. So we do have a couple of other things where we had some foundation funding and we're trying to make sure that we have enough otherwise to pull those exhibitions into the digital space as well. We are not open now. We have 2 days a week where staff only go in to try to attend to different details, but we actually have most of our traffic through the Center for Architecture because of public programming that we hold, where we would have 50, 60, 70 to 100 people in the space of an evening, and they'll also spend time with our exhibitions. We don't charge admission because the people have either paid for the lecture or our member base. So we have not been able to partly justify the expense of reopening in the face of not actually taking in any income by doing so. We've pivoted to a host of public programming online, over, I think somebody said 300 webinars since March. And we also did summer camps and after school programming virtually as well. And we're continuing those after schools in the digital space, which is a source of funding and some revenue because that is after school programming. But it's still a little bit touch and go each time whether the income will offset the direct expense that we incur by keeping the staff and keeping the educators and getting those materials out to people.
Muted. Great, thank you, Suzanne. I hold Center for Architecture in general as a special place in my heart because I have a background with AIA in another city, so I appreciate the work of AIA and especially AIA New York. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for that, for your input there. I kind of want to step back a little bit. And you know, Jay had touched on something about the emotional aspect and the catharsis of connecting with peers, other institutional peers during this time. And then I think maybe ID talked about, or Amy had covered about, I think it was ID from the Whitney had talked about visitors feeling safe. And so much of the reopening focus has been about the physical, right? The social distancing and the physical and the space and how it all works. But internally, we're all either professionally or we're seeing it within the visitors who are coming into those spaces, or maybe even people that are connecting with your institutions online. And so it's kind of a personal question. You can keep it however you want, but you know, how else, you know, if anyone wants to address any of that, feel free to hop in, but either the emotional aspect of your visitor or people that are connecting with you online, or just even between your fellow peers.
Valerie, I'd like to weigh in on that. So I'm the executive director at the Renee and Chaim Gross Foundation. So we preserve and interpret the historic home, studio, and art collections of the 20th century sculptor Chaim Gross. So our mission is encompassing public programming, research, and exhibitions about 20th century artists in New York, and specifically sculptural modernism. Because we have such a small space, we have not reopened yet. It is a townhouse building, has one staircase, unlike the New York City Fire Museum, where Gary was able to think of a solution where you have a ingress and egress kind of figured out with that sort of extra staircase. We don't have that solution in place. So the emotional impact of visiting the foundation is one of being in a home. So we've been working on translating that to digital platforms, and we've had a much larger audience, but we also found that something is lacking. You don't have the same intimate quality of discussion. In 2019, we had sort of very much increased our level of tours. So we already had an online ticketing system with docents giving tours. So there's already a very personal connection happening with each visitor that came to our space. So on the one hand, we already have that system set up for us, but we don't feel that people will be comfortable in our space as it currently is set up. And so that's one of the reasons why we're delaying our reopening. So I just wanted to express that, you know, emotionally, I think that we connect with one another through Zoom, and I'm very grateful for all my colleagues for just, you know, all these wonderful discussions. But I think that in-person experience is really something that, you know, we want to return to very quickly. And I think very much as I hear all these different, you know, experiences from others, that's something that we need very much, and soon.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to chime in on that question, or I'll move to the next one?
We'll just say one thing with the emotional connection. Definitely, we have leveraged our digital programming with several of them having breakout rooms and breakout sessions, you know, following the lecture portion, and that gives people a little bit more of that opportunity to talk in small groups and maybe even work on a whiteboard together. That seems to definitely make people feel that even in this digital space, they are more really connected. Also, I've been finding in recent weeks that sometimes replacing the Zoom or visual format with a telephone conference call seems to also enhance people's ability to feel a more natural flow of conversation.
Got it. Yeah, definitely we can get, thank you for that, Suzanne. We can definitely get Zoom fatigue. That's for sure.
You know, that's another aspect I think we're all learning from the whole COVID experience, is that we're switching to these platforms. I mean, how many of us even heard of Zoom before March of this year? But we've talked a lot about the communities that we service, but the other aspect of that is our staff. You know, how do we all interact to get these things accomplished that we are being challenged with right now? I'm old enough to wish I would rather sit across the table from somebody, have a conversation with them, than do it on screen or on telephone or text messaging or anything else. That's the way I prefer that's the way I've been my whole life. So as the director of the museum, it's challenging for me personally to try to lead this group with digital media. I don't like it. It adds a layer of difficulty for me to try to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And again, I think we're experiencing that in our personal lives as well, but here we are talking about servicing our customers as it is. But it's also our staff that are greatly impacted by what's going on. We have to keep that in mind as well.
Gary, you bring up a great point of also trying to do the mission of each of your institutions, but also knowing that your staff is also going through their own thing as well through all of this. And how do you get people aligned all remotely and for experiences that are typically such an in-person component? That's a really great point. I'm going to quickly point out that that we have something from Kristen Marting in the chat, who's saying that that she did something similar for theaters. So maybe a multidisciplinary art walk that could also maybe be expanded beyond. The more the merrier. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Kristen is as a public member of our Arts and Institutions Committee. You know, Nancy's bringing up an interesting point in the chat, and I want to ask each of you guys, and some of you have alluded to either city funding or not. And I see Robin sponsored that idea. Robin, amazing leader. CB2, thank you so much for adding that, Kristen. So, you know, Nancy's mentioned something here, you know, you guys have some have mentioned about city funding or whatnot. You've mentioned PPP, federal funding. What do you need from your elected officials right now, either on the city, state, federal level? And what do you need now? What do you need in 6 months? If anyone wants to take that question on.
You know, I'm feeling a lot of, you know, just totally transparently, that's just the way we roll. There's a lot of jockeying for position right now. So we're nonpartisan. You know, there's a lot, as probably have heard about the whole jail. People have been trying to bring MoCA into a lot of this and a lot of false accusations. We're trying to do our work as our museum. And, you know, we're just sort of like, it's hard enough right now to do everything that we want to do with the mission of what we're trying to do. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on in downtown Manhattan that is way beyond our pay grade. And with them, you know, there's a lot, we feel a lot of pressure, and it can also be extremely negative, you know, talking about the morale of the team. So just to let all of you know is we're just trying to stick with our mission. We are nonpartisan. We are a historical museum. We are trying to get out of the fire fiasco. There have been over 2,000 acts of racism against Asian Americans, and we are collecting all the stories, both negative and positive, around how people are trying to do that. There was a lot of graffiti on our buildings. We're terrified because many of you know that the current administration is casting Chinese people and Chinese Americans and Asian Americans as the enemy. So Pompeo making crazy remarks in Wisconsin. We consistently talk about how that what level, like, alert are we at as far as being a target, you know, whether it's domestic target or whether it's some other crazy target, or whether, you know, please vouch for me, I'm a US citizen, like if they send me to an internment camp. These are real fears that we have as an organization because of the bilateral, because of the domestic, and then even on a lower level in the community, where there are a lot of people sort of jockeying for position and therefore taking a stance on things. And, you know, we haven't spoken directly to an elected official, you know, in the COVID period, outside of Chief of Staff Gigi Lee. So we haven't spoken to anyone. You know, the mayor has not, you know, reached out to us. I've never spoken to the mayor directly. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And I think maybe arts and culturals are sometimes getting the brunt of something, but it's all this like tangential thing. And we're just trying to stay the course and do what we need to do the work that fits our mission. But it's heavy. We have very heavy days. And sometimes we take one step forward and we feel like we're taking 3 steps back.
Valerie?
Thank you for that. Sure, Joseph, go ahead. Thank you for that, Nancy.
Nancy, I totally understand what you're saying, and I feel your pain. The arts community may not be as aware of it, but you know, the Italian American community has been under attack quite a bit in the country as of late. And I've been worried about that, actually, in terms of the museum. There is this pushback against Columbus, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it. There's a pushback against it. And you talked about the graffiti, and you talked about the looting that took place in Lower Manhattan, and especially along Broadway. In opening up the new museum for the Italian Americans, I've had to think seriously about hiring a security expert to retrofit the place so that serious damage won't be done. Because so here's an opportunity, and this is where I reach out to CB2, and I think this is great what you're doing, Valerie. We need to really band together, because when whether it's the Asians are attacked or the Italians are attacked or Black Lives Matter are attacked, whoever's attacked, we all need to stand together and make it clear that this is not something that we want to see happen. We're here to present culture. We're not really here to be political, and that's all. That's really to tell our stories and or to share our art, and that's all that it's about. Now I know I'm preaching to the choir. What I'm saying, and each one of us, I think, probably feels the same way about this. But I think if we speak with a united voice, even just from CB2, we'll get heard a lot better, because we really aren't being heard. And the smaller museums in particular, really, even under the last administration, and some of you may have gotten some funding from the. I'm not talking about this administration, but I'm talking about the city administration. It was only like the major cultural institutions in New York that got any funding whatsoever, really, of any purport. So I've already written it off. I don't even think about it. I just basically go private. And that's all that I've been. All that I want to do. I've had elected officials with good intentions, and I won't mention their names, who said, "Why don't you apply for this?" Because I have, and it's not worth it. The amount of energy and the amount of money that you have to put into writing the grants in order to be rejected, it's a waste of time. So I'd rather just go to the corporate sector or to the private individual who gives me $5 or $10, and eventually and raise money that way. Some of them give more than that. I be honest with you, but that's been an issue for me too. So yeah, there's a lot of hate out there right now, and we need to be really careful. And I'm sure that every one of the groups has been affected by this in some way, shape, or form. And I worry about it. I really do. We have to help. We have to finally tone it down. I don't know how we're going to do that though. Anyway, thank you, Nancy, for bringing it up.
I think one of the other aspects too about funding, I'm hearing some of you talk about that, and Valerie asked the question about what do we need from our elected officials. A lot of the private funding and corporate funding really has been rechanneled. Even those few who would fund cultural institutions or had a particular interest in a particular mission of a specific cultural institution, are really channeling their money now to a lot of the needs of the pandemic. So whether it's helping the impacted communities, or whether it's buying supplies, some money from those private sources are going to other avenues now. And what we are now relying on is those government sources. And so you look at things like IMLS or any of the other government programs that are out there for cultural institutions. We're heavily relying on those, and we're seeing across the board, whether it's city, state, or federal, major economic problems because of everything that's being the result of this pandemic. So our funding sources, both from the governmental side and the private side, are really taking a hit, and that's where our challenges lie in the future.
Thank you for that, Gary, and thank you, Nancy and Joseph. I think I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit. Everyone's brought up really great points, but to Nancy and Joseph specifically about just the political climate and all of the social justice initiatives, and kind of knowing that your visitor to each of your institutions is maybe seeing things through a different lens. What has that been like, knowing kind of what our district has gone through over the past few months, really highlighting a lot of things to you know, really highlighting a lot of things that have been injustices for a very long time, but maybe newer to your audiences, or you know, that we're hearing out in, you know, in the street with everything happening as of late, and with the news of the Breonna Taylor case yesterday. You know, you're kind of bringing and reopening to a new kind of mindset. And so what are each of your institutions doing, knowing that, you know, equity in all forms is being reevaluated and looked at? If anyone wants to jump in on there.
You know, we made a statement early on about Black Lives Matter, and we did not use it in any way to talk about our own programs or content. And I think that there is, in the team's opinion and board, that there is 400 years of oppression and systemic racism, and that's true. And we need to ally in any way that we can on BLM. So we've done a lot of programming around that, and I think, you know, just speaking honestly, like there needs to be systemic change in so many different levels. And we're talking about the governance of arts and culturals. We're talking about the infrastructure of the teams, thinking about flatter organizations, thinking about more leveraging technology, getting funding to be more equitable, you know, in some sort of systematic way, or just getting federal funding to cover so the G&O, so that we can have a fairer system and think of new initiatives, and maybe that's covered locally. I don't know, but the structure is broken, and it's painful. And many of us know that if you're not a CIG, it's painful. If you're a CIG, it's painful. And those are the realities of where we are. But I am hopeful that foundations have taken a significant lead in trying to change the landscape. And I think that all we can do here is just really look at their ways and then try to encourage them to really think about equity. And at the same time, you know, I don't know, it's hard. It's really, really difficult to think, like, when is it enough, right? When do we have enough funding? When are we working at maximum efficiency? And when do we say we don't need that? Someone else deserves it. Like, I think all of those things are things that I hope will come out of this space. And you know, that being also said, there is a lot of racism toward Asian Americans. And if people look at my face for some reason, despite the fact that I'm born here, I'm still somehow considered a foreigner. And a fifth generation Chinese person from Mississippi, you know, whose parents worked on the railroads, they're also considered a foreigner often, like, you know, where are you really from? The questions are just so over the top, you know, crazy. And so sometimes you do see, it says like, you know, Blacks, Latinos, and other underrepresented groups. And I think it's like, we need this whole like change in terms of thinking about the landscape. And I feel like there's so much that needs to be done on BLM. And I will be the first one to say that if we get that right and systemic change happens, then we will all benefit from that. And that's why we're 100% just like, you know, it's the time is now. And I feel like we're all committed to that as a staff. So more collaboration is, I guess, is one takeaway.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Anyone else want to hop in on that?
Maybe I'll just say one thing about BLM, and I'm not sure I'm responding to your full question, but I just you know, what Nancy said sparked some thoughts in me. Sure. And clearly, I mean, this spring, I think there was a great reckoning across, you know, across the city, across the country, across every institution. And speaking for the Whitney in particular, you know, looking at this through the lens of our mission as a Museum of American Art, America in all its forms, what America is, what America can be, it really did resonate. These aren't questions that are new to us. We've been talking about and thinking about equity and inclusion for years. It's a part of our current strategic plan, but it really sort of reemerged for us and forced us to ask really critical questions this spring. We had a series of all hands, sort of all staff gatherings where we talked very candidly about these issues and had smaller sessions as well. And one of the things that emerged for me, and I completely agree with Nancy about sort of the systemic issues that we all face, one of the things that emerged for me from those conversations internally was this, I think for the first time in a long time, I saw this desire and a sense of agency on the part of individuals. Institutions are made up of people, and those people end up being the face of the institutions in many ways. And I saw with many of my colleagues a desire to really interrogate our role in these systems, our role as individuals, our roles personally, our roles in our positions within the museum, and the role of the institution as a whole. And so one of the very tangible things, and as daunting as these challenges are, it feels hopeless unless you're doing something personally. And one of the things that we launched over the course of this summer, into the fall, that I'm particularly proud of, and I have high hopes for, was the beginnings of a true training curriculum for our staff for the first time ever, and not a one-off, anti-racism training or sort of implicit bias training. It really was developing a curriculum. We partnered with an institute and a think tank out of academia, out of the Ohio State University, to develop a curriculum for our staff so that we're setting sort of the same sort of ground. We're all engaging with the same vocabulary, tools, skills, and building that foundation to address these issues, whether they're in the ways we think about audience development or in our programs or in whatever aspects of our work it might be. And that launched this fall and felt incredibly hopeful. I mean, I think we're learning together, we're questioning together, we're being willing to be critical together, we're looking at our programs through that lens. So it does feel invigorating in that way, but it clearly, I think this spring provided hopefully a jumping off point for true, critical thinking on the parts of cultural institutions, especially in a city like New York, where, we see sort of the best of and the worst of all in the same city.
Thank you so much for that, ID. Thank you for sharing all of that. And that curriculum sounds amazing because it brings up a great point that we're beyond one-offs. We're beyond one workshop is just a Band-Aid on a leaking faucet of sorts. So thank you for that and sharing the Whitney's perspective there. I really like the questioning together and that idea of questioning together. Does anyone else want to chime in on the equity?
Valerie, if I could say something.
Definitely.
I love the conversation that we're having about the self-reflection. We have a very small staff, but that's something that, was a very central part of what we're discussing this summer internally, talking specifically about revamping our intern program and rethinking how better to do that in a more equitable manner. Something that I've been thinking a lot about as well is the accessibility involved with reopening. A lot of institutions have increased their costs for entry, or they're very limited. You have to book very far in advance. One of the things that we took pride in was the fact that you could, as long as you came at the appointed time, you could pay with cash, card, check, however you needed. We also had events that were free, that occurred very frequently, or pay what you wish. With this new environment, we're using a lot of digital forms, which are free, part of our mission. But I think that as we move to reopening, we have to kind of question ourselves, and are we limiting access? We won't be able to do as many tours as we used to give, for one thing. But then also, the cost of running them is higher. So how do you make that work in terms of your budget, but also equity?
That's great. Yeah, the idea of the admission costs being prohibited and not being inclusive, as well as the idea of serendipity as a way of inclusivity as well. It's really great. Thank you for bringing that up. If anyone else wants to speak on that issue, otherwise I'm happy to give you the airtime. If anyone else wants to speak on the equity issue, or if not right now, feel free to chime in, but I am gonna move to the Q&A portion. I think you've heard enough questions from me. I know that we have amazing committee members for both arts and institutions and for the reopening working group. So I'd like to open up the floor to members of those committees to ask questions. So if you'll raise your hand, if you're on either the Arts and Institutions Committee or the Reopening Working Group, if you have any questions for our panelists. Not seeing any CB2 board members that are on this call. If you have any specific questions, I still have more questions, but I know we're at the 8:30 hour, so I'm sure people would like to get on, but oh, we do have a question. Here we go. Donna.
So I had one for the Fire Museum, which was with the school programming. Are you able to do any of that online and offer it to the kids in schools online? It sounded really important.
I have to unmute myself here. We have not yet. Are you hearing me? I see somebody else on my screen. Okay.
I hear you.
The education program that we do
There's only 2 board members.
is
Go ahead,
actually
Sarah.
something that the fire department puts together. So we have their educators here, and I have a little note on my pad here to see what the status of that is, to see where we are with developing a digital program for that. But I think that that's in the works, and we will try to bring that online as well. Again, that's why I had asked the question before about monetizing these. You know, when school groups come to the museum, there is, as I said, a minor charge for that. I don't see how, certainly technically, we'll probably come up with a mechanism for charging people, but we really don't want to. So it just speaks again to the impact of the pandemic on cultural institutions, where we have to replace some of these programs that were revenue generating before to make sure that we do continue to satisfy our mission to make these digital platforms available and get them out there. So back to the other question, you know, that's where we're going to have to maybe rely on some government funding for some of the things that we do so that we can make these things possible.
Especially as more people are home right now and everything, it just seems really important that they get that instruction about how to check for fires and everything. Yeah. So add that to the government list.
Great, thank you, Donna. Are there any other questions from board members or committee members? I'm going to ask 2 quick ones then, if nobody else has other questions.
Valerie?
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much. It was a great meeting. I really, very informative, and I'm very happy that everybody presented such a great way. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this meeting. It was fabulous. I learned a lot about what's happening, and so I can't wait to go back to our meetings. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Rocio.
I don't think I can raise my hand.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Robin. Yes, of course. Sorry, I like my screen is so limited.
I was just curious if, you know, obviously we didn't want any of this to happen, but I'm wondering if any of the changes that you had to make adjustments are actually good changes that you see are something that will be good for the future, or is everything you had to do bad? I'm just curious if there's any silver lining in any of this.
I'll report back on that. One thing that we have found is that, you know, we both a professional association and a cultural institution. And on the professional association side, we have many of our committees meetings in the evenings, and we found that by having them digitally, we've had in most cases an increase in the participation of members to those planning and peer-to-peer networking opportunities, because they see you know, people who had to run home because they were providing childcare, or because they were you know, otherwise constrained in terms of their transportation options, are now able to participate. And we would anticipate continuing some of this virtual meeting opportunity when we go back to the center. One other thing that I think has been a boon is that we have been able to expand our collaboration with, you know, AIA is part of a national association. And so we've been able to expand our leveraging of their knowledge to bring to our New Yorkers, as well as being able to have our members' expertise and knowledge get to farther corners of the continent and frankly, even the globe. So I think those are definitely, we will continue to probably try to offer from time to time these kinds of virtual programs so we can have speakers in 5 different time zones and, you know, everybody talking together.
Great, thank you. I know I've got a question from a member of the public. I'm gonna put two quick topics, and if anyone wants to do a rapid fire to address either of them, great. Winter coat checks or any of that. Anyone wants to answer anything about that? And or you know, Nancy had mentioned rent. Anything with rent in your landlord? If anyone wants to talk about that. And if not, that's okay. I'm gonna go to Zella Jones, who has a question.
Okay,
Zella?
I'm unmuted. I don't have a question.
Okay, I thought you had your hand raised.
No. I have incredible praise for this entire meeting. You did a beautiful, beautiful job, and I am so enthused by the innovation of our art-based institutions, and so pleased that you've given them a voice. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Zella. All right. I know that there was a question from Pete Davies in the chat, and he has left us. But I will just send that to the person it was directed to. In the chat, so if there are no other questions, I'm going to address one quick thing in the chat. There are no other questions from board members or committee members or the public. Nancy had put in the chat that she sees a future CB2 DC Culture Week. So just throwing that out there. It sounds like we'll connect people over email and see what comes out of this. But I would like to, and Robin, I'll let you, do you have anything you want to say before we wrap up the meeting?
No, the last thing I'll say is I hope, that people have found a way to sort of connect at this, after this meeting, the enthusiasm remains, and we find this is sort of a jumping off point to, we have such a great, diverse group of people here, all really intelligent, all really filled with empathy, and I would love to find a way to harness that and have us all, manage to keep this going in some way without, I know we're all busy, so I don't want to, add more work, but just, I also don't want to lose what we started tonight. So hope we can all start thinking about how that might work.
Thank you. And thank you, Robin, for being a great partner in crime and pulling this panel together. It's been really great to work with you.
Same here, but you did the heavy lifting, so you get the...
No. And I would like to offer to the, so if there's any last, before I kind of say my closing remarks, if there are any last, from any of the panelists tonight, if there are any, final thoughts. I feel like that's from like a talk show from the 90s. So if anyone has any final thoughts they want to say, or just maybe you heard something tonight and you want to comment on it, this is your chance. So just feel free to chime in. You don't have to raise your hand. So if anyone wants to, and no, you don't have to say anything, but I just want to make sure if you have anything you want to leave with the rest of the panel, panelists and public, this is your chance.
I would like to just suggest one thing is that we are getting into the colder months and colder weather. So there's a tendency to want to move indoors, but I saw a great quote yesterday, which I'm going to carry with me through this winter, is there's no bad weather, there's just bad clothing. So if we invest in keeping ourselves warm with good clothing, we can be outside as the Canadians and the Scandinavians do. And I think that leads, the other thing that I keep thinking about is how we as culturals can also leverage the public domain, the streetscape. We've talked about window exhibitions and, but what about walking tours, scavenger hunts, or those kinds of opportunities. I'd love to see us try to make people explore this CB2.
Anyone else want to chime in? Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you.
I was just going to say what I think is totally the obvious based on all of us being here. But, I guess for me, this last 6 months has been so incredibly poignant. But you know, the cultural sector, the arts institutions, artists is like one of the most important things in our city, like bar none. It's, you know, it's why so many people come to New York City. It's what, you know, it lives here, and we all work so hard to uphold the institutions that fuel that. And so, you know, I'm grateful for meetings like this and for all the conversations I've had these last 6 months. But I guess, you know, just to underscore like the centrality of that to making this a viable city is essential to me. And I feel like everyone here is doing that to such a high degree, but it's, you know, that's the message. You know, I just couldn't say that enough. You know, so, yeah.
Thank you, Jay. Anyone else?
You asked earlier what our electeds could do to help, and I think it's exactly what Jay just said: spread the word and how we can get the message out and the advocacy, and you know, all of that just helps our arts and cultural organizations so much. So please,
Thank you,
please help.
Amy. Thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation. Anyone else? All right. Going once, going twice. Oh yes, someone has put in here to make sure you complete the census. Yes, definitely agree. There's a small part of that funding in there. So I'll just kind of leave you. Thank you again to all of our panelists, to our presenters. Thank you so much. You know, in this quarantines, you know, we're still in the attention economy. So thank you for your time tonight. Please know that this was live streamed on the CB2 Facebook page, so you're free to watch it again or share it with your colleagues. So please feel free to share it from the page. And let us know, let Robin and myself know. You have both of us on email, or just reach out to Robin. Either way, it'll get to the right people, but let us know how we can syndicate your events on on the CB2 marketing channels, whether that's through Twitter, Facebook, our newsletter. We have our newsletter is probably our largest marketing channel. So let us know what we can do to bring visibility, even more visibility to what you're doing. We'd be happy to do that. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for participating tonight, and more to come soon. I'm excited to see what we build together out of this. So thank you.